Hello, Robert. I am a new fan. I love your ghost stories on Makeup Mondays, and I find your other makeup videos especially entertaining and very helpful. Now, I have a story for you. This one I call The Eloper. Now, this takes place in New Mexico, USA. The southwestern region of the United States has a very haunted history attached to it, especially with the indigenous people here, all the different cultures, the history that was paved over and just systemically erased, all the historical events associated with the early years of the statehood, and also added to all of this. I grew up in Southern California and had not really seen this kind of culture before moving out here, so I was pleasantly surprised by the rich history in the stories. As much as I love hearing the paranormal stories, I had never really experienced anything visual or particularly frightening. That was, of course, until I started working night shifts at a hospital that had been in operation since the 1800s. This hospital was amazing. It was in the middle of a valley, more populated with wildlife than people, and had empty cottages around it that were reserved for the nurses and doctors that attended to the patients here. A bit of a drive just to get in there. In the front doors, that area was not very well lit, so it had a very spooky vibe to it at night. The Historical Society preserved a few choice cottages and held them open for tours regularly. It was once an army fort, and then a TB hospital, and finally a palliative care facility. Now, I consider myself a difficult person to convince when it comes to personal experiences. There has been some kind of logic, reasoning, evidence, something to explain my little scares. After a few months of working in this hospital, I had grown comfortable with the building. To clock in for night shifts, you had to slide your key card at the rear basement entrance, as the main door was closed by the time the shift had started. The halls were wide and empty because of the service areas, laundry, kitchen, maintenance, the morgue, things like that. One week I was assigned to work in another room of the hospital, another wing, which was not uncommon. I made my way through the main basement corridor and had a habit of looking down each dark hall, making sure I didn't run into someone or a cart or something. The first corridor was dark and empty. Walk a little further. I looked down the second corridor, and I saw a man standing at the very end, right in front of the service doors. Because of his bright clothing, mustard yellow long-sleeve top, royal blue pants, dark hair I assumed, I waved at him, thinking he was maybe one of the nurses or techs in scrubs. He didn't react. He just stood there like he was ready to either run or fight, kind of wide-armed and legs at shoulder gait. Head and shoulders kind of crouched down. I just kept walking and didn't think twice about it. I made it through the dark basement to the ward I was assigned to and worked there for a little over a week. A couple weeks later, I was assigned to work the ward above the previous one. It was a men's ward, and I hadn't worked there before, so this was a learning experience. I got the rundown for the ward and the duties. I set myself up at a station near the end of the hall, and this ward was on the third floor, so there was really only one way into the area. It was 1 in the morning or so. I had finished my duties for that round and taken a seat at my station for charting. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone peek out of a room about 15 feet cat-a-corner from me. I assumed it was someone needing help with a patient, so I went to the room and did not find anyone that I could talk to or look at. There was no one in the room. There were 2 patients there. One that needed a mechanical lift to be moved to a chair, and the other one was literally on his deathbed. There was a third bed in the room, but it was vacant. I checked on the patients in the room. They were sound asleep. Nothing else was there. Shaken, I sat back at my station and must have looked a little bit like I was staring off. Someone walked up to me and asked if I was okay, and I just kind of brushed it off and said, "I'm fine." He then asked for my help, and so I was quick to go and help him. The whole time I could have sworn I saw someone peek out from that room, looked both ways down the hall, and then quickly regressed back into the room. I remember a head and a single shoulder as if the body tilted from the standing position to peek out the door. What really stood out was the mustard yellow top and dark hair. What really startled me was that I don't remember seeing a face. That shook me. I couldn't even sleep once I got off shift, for I was really trying to remember any single feature of his face. Anything. Shape of the nose, cheekbone, anything. Finally, before falling asleep, I remember recalling that I had seen that colored top on someone down in the basement the first night I worked that other wing. I slept a dreamless sleep that day. Running on adrenaline, I knew that I was going to work one more night before my string of days off. Of course, I get to work and I am told that I am needed in another ward, but this time it was the men's ward on the second floor. Comforted that I was not returning to the site of that questionable experience the night before, I went straight to work in the busy ward. At around 3 in the morning, there was a lull and I was able to get to know a nurse on the ward. As we were talking, asking questions about routines there, etc., a photo collage was hanging on the wall and caught my eye. There were pictures of patients and staffs at picnic areas and other places. The nurse told me that they used to take patients out in groups to different outings and would make events out of these things. But since there was not much staff, it was not a regular occurrence anymore. Finally, one picture stopped me mid-sentence. It was the man in the mustard yellow top and royal blue pants. He was sitting with some other people at a picnic table. I asked her, "Hey, who's this guy? Does he work in this wing?" She looked at the picture and then smiled, almost a reminiscent smile. "Oh, that's Mr. So-and-so. He was a patient here about 10 years ago. He started off in this ward, and then he moved up to the ward on the 3rd floor as his condition worsened. You had to watch him. He would sneak down the service doors, by the loading dock and the kitchen, and wait for someone to open the double doors and then just bolt out the building. He would elope. He ended up passing away in the room he moved to, which was directly above this room." And she pointed to a room about 10 feet away from us. It was the room directly below the one I had seen the person peeking out of the night before. She must have noticed my face shift from dark tan to an uncharacteristically pale color. She asked me if I was okay, and I couldn't stop myself. It all just came out. I told her about the person I saw in the basement and the experience I had the night before. She listened and even had a little devious smirk every now and then. "Oh, you saw him too?" She sipped at her coffee. "Too?" She giggled. "Yeah, a few people have seen him. He hasn't appeared to anyone so frequently before, though. But he looks so real that people just brush him off as an employee. You're not from around here, but this kind of stuff is just part of working here. It's best not to pay much attention to it, and they'll leave you alone." That was not the last time I could not explain something.